My mother has a moderate hearing loss, and she grew up with two deaf parents. And so in the deaf world, she's considered culturally deaf. And so while she is able to have a conversation in English verbally, she's part of the deaf world. So there's the medical definition of deafness, but there's also the cultural definition of deafness.
And are you the only sibling who is not deaf?
So there's 3 of us who are biological siblings and 4 adopted siblings.
Oh, wow.
And of the 3 biological siblings, one of us is profoundly deaf, and then 2 of us have a mild hearing loss. And then of my 4 adopted siblings, 3 of them are deaf.
Welcome to A Life Worth Working, a podcast about how we get to the soul of work.
We're your hosts, Dana Allen Walsh and Michelle Weiss. I'm the senior pastor of a progressive church, and Michelle is a writer on the future of education and work.
And as always, we love hearing your comments, questions, and thoughts. So please know you can email us at any time at hello@alifeworthworking.com.
Please make sure you subscribe to our show, give it all the stars, and share it with your friends and loved ones who may be searching for more meaning in their work lives. Here's pastor and reality TV star Jacob Buchholz's contribution to the shit pile. Jacob grew up culturally deaf, meaning that he grew up in a mostly deaf household and identifies with and actively participates in his deaf culture.
So I would love to hear about your life and how you got into ministry.
I grew up going to church. My mother's a pastor, but she's a pastor of a deaf church.
Oh,
and
wow.
so it was a church where the service was entirely in American Sign Language, and there were more deaf cultural forms of worship. And so a lot of churches rely on music. And so our church would do American Sign Language storytelling and poetry. And that was more the emphasis of our shared time together as a church. And historically, a lot of the denominations that have been really involved in deaf ministry have been very conservative denominations that have wanted to save deaf people's souls and heal them of their deafness. And so my mother being a pastor in a context where a lot of deaf churches didn't support women in ministry, that was really formative for me. Just seeing her always on the front lines of justice work, pushing back against the patriarchy in the church as it existed, and also trying to fight for deaf rights. And so a lot of my siblings are deaf. Not a lot of deafness is genetic, but it's genetic in my family. So grandparents, aunts, uncles, siblings. And so my brothers and sisters were going to a deaf school when I was younger that wasn't using the right form of education for the deaf. They were using something called simultaneous communication, where you sign and talk at the same time, rather than bilingual education, where you teach deaf students in American Sign Language and then also teach them English. And so my family led this massive protest against the deaf school. And so that was really formative for me too, just seeing my mother on the front lines of pushing against the school, protesting, doing that work. And so that was really important for me, but not on a path towards the church. I went to college interested in studying government. I thought being involved in local politics was how I wanted to live out that call to justice work. And when I went to college, just realizing that I wasn't personality-wise cut out for the political world was eye-opening for me. And so I went with a brother of mine to Romania and Moldova, and we learned there's over 120 different sign languages in the world. And so we learned Romanian Sign Language and Russian Sign Language to take this trip, and we were working with deaf communities there. And in other countries, rights for deaf communities aren't as advanced as they are here in the United States. And so in those countries, deaf individuals weren't allowed to go to school past the 3rd grade. And a lot of places, they weren't allowed to have government jobs or to work. And so being able to work with these communities and to talk with them in their heart language of Russian or Romanian Sign Language, and to be able to share with them for the first time in their languages something about this good news that I believed as a person of faith, that God is a God of all people and that God speaks directly into systems of oppression. seeing how the church could do that with less bureaucratic red tape than the government could was really transformative for me again. So it was another major experience. So I went back to college, changed my major, studied religion, went right to seminary after college, and haven't looked back since. While I was in seminary, my mother and one of my brothers, the biological sibling who's profoundly deaf, we started a deaf church in Kansas City. So we had always been in whatever church would let us use their space. But oftentimes these hearing congregations would make decisions for us, or they would say, we need to worship together. But then they would say, we're going to worship in our space and you're going to be the ones using the interpreter, rather than them coming into our space and using someone who's interpreting into English. And so it always felt like there were these power dynamics that were a bit oppressive. And so we really wanted to start a completely autonomous deaf church that could be self-sufficient. And so while I was in seminary, we started this deaf church. And so after graduation, went back to that church, and that local church is the church that ordained me. And we were, I like to say, trans-denominational. There are so few deaf churches that people of all religious backgrounds have to go to the same place. And so you can't really say you're of a specific denomination because you need people to feel comfortable no matter what their background is, because it's the one deaf church that they have. And so I did that for a couple years during seminary, and then for 1 year after I graduated. And then that was when I was in the process of marrying my wife, who is also an ordained clergy person. And she took a job in Lincoln, Nebraska as an associate pastor. And so I followed her there. And for a while, I was planning on starting a deaf church there. And while I was in the works of doing that, I was working as an American Sign Language interpreter. And that's when a United Church of Christ congregation, which is my denomination now, reached out to me to offer an opportunity to preach at a satellite church. And that's when I found out, oh, there's this denomination that is incredibly progressive and fits my theology and what I'm trying to do with my ministry work. And so that's how I fell into my current denomination. And so I was in Lincoln, Nebraska for 3 years, and now Claremont, California for 9 years.
It's great. And now tell us about your latest venture.
Yes. So this was something that I was not looking for at all, but my wife and co-pastor Jen, she saw an advertisement that they were doing a test of a new reality show, and they were specifically looking for a pastor. And they were just going to be testing it for a couple of days in Los Angeles. I live near Los Angeles. They were going to be compensating it. And so I thought, this is a really silly, fun way to make a few extra dollars. I'll go and help them test out this reality show. When else are they actually looking for a pastor?
That's right. Why were they looking for a pastor?
The ad for the show was they wanted people from professions that use persuasion. And so they thought that a clergy person is someone that uses persuasion. And so I filled out this long application and sent it in, but I didn't hear anything. And so completely forgot about it. About 8 months later, I get a call from a casting company, and they tell me they are casting for the actual show. It's no longer the test. And so they're wondering if I would interview for the actual show. And at that point, it was completely silly. It was not something that I thought would ever be possible. But just as a fun thought experiment, I said yes, and I did the interview. And they came back after that interview, and they said, oh, you know what? We really like you, but we don't understand how you can be a pastor if you're not wearing a collar. And so I realized, okay, these people really don't know that much about the church. And so I bought a shirt with a collar and popped it on for my next interview, and was talking with the network at that point and the production company, and it just kept going. And I just kind of fell forward with it. Each interview along the way, there was probably 4 or 5 interviews. At one point, I was having some health issues, and so I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to back out of this process. But they came back and said, you know what, no, we're interested in you. So if you could keep working with us, please do. And at that point, I had to start thinking about whether this was something that was realistic for me. And it seemed like leaving my wife and my 3-year-old and the church for an extended period of time wasn't going to be possible. But as I kept thinking about it, I thought, you know what, if this show is going to cast a pastor and put a pastor on national television, I really want it to be a pastor that is inclusive and is a pastor that fits the progressive values that I hold dear. So if they were going to put a pastor on national television that was anti-gay or anti-immigrant, I wouldn't want that sort of platform for someone who I personally don't agree with on those values. And so I thought, that seems like a really important opportunity to showcase a more inclusive Christianity, that there are people of faith out there working to make the world a better place, that are trying to fight against these very real, very true stereotypes of Christians being hypocritical and judgmental and hateful. And there's so many Christian voices out there that are preaching what I consider to be hate. And so I thought, here's a chance for a pastor to be on a national television show that wants to preach a different message. And so I said yes. And it was a wild experience.
So Jacob, tell me, how much do you know going into it as far as location, time commitment, dynamics of who you're going to be with?
Yeah, that was part of the fun part, being on the first season of a new show, is that all of the contestants knew absolutely nothing. The only thing that they had shared with me is we're getting people from professions that use persuasion. And so they did not allow us to have any contact with any of the other contestants beforehand. They made sure that if you see episode 1, it begins with all of us popping out of these life-size shipping containers, these crates. And that's the moment that we see each other for the very first time.
Wow.
We didn't know what the name of the show was. We didn't know what the premise was. So we pop out of these crates, and the host, Jim Jeffries, a comedian from Australia, he proclaims, "Welcome to the snake." And I'm like, oh my God, the snake? What is this? We've gathered 15 master manipulators. And I'm thinking to myself, manipulators? That is not how I want to be described.
Oh my God.
There are a lot of manipulative pastors out there, and I'm trying to work against that stereotype. And here I am saying I'm a master manipulator. And so that was eye-opening. But at that point, I just have to roll with it. Yeah, I'm in it. So that was really interesting to be thrown into it, not knowing anything about what was going to happen.
That's crazy. Feels a little Hunger Games.
It really did feel like Hunger Games in terms of the fact that we're in this circle, staring at each other, wondering what we're about to do.
So what are the other professions who are manipulators?
Yeah, the show starts out with 15 of us, and that includes a detective, a police officer, poker player, makeup artist, boxer, bull rider, nonprofit worker, HR director, tech executive, OnlyFans creator, lawyer, and bounty hunter. So I think I may have gotten everybody there.
Wow. I could see the lawyer in there, but some of those other ones I would not have, like a makeup artist.
Yeah. And when we're standing there looking at each other, we don't know. All we know are the professions because the host announces that, but we don't know which person is which profession. And some of us were really clear. I'm standing there in a collar. And so clearly I'm the pastor. But interestingly, a lot of the contestants told me for a long time, they thought that was part of the show, was that I was a fake pastor. They didn't think that a real pastor would actually be there. Right. And so a lot of them did not trust me at the beginning. So they had religious trauma that they were bringing. Oh. There was one person who was there who's openly gay, and he thought that I was going to be anti-gay. Mm-hmm. So the very thing that I'm there to preach against, he was worried that I was going to be representing the opposite. And so he was really wary about me at the beginning. And so these people bringing this religious trauma and wondering, could this guy really be a pastor? At first, they didn't think so. And then, of course, they're just really uncomfortable. They're there to experience this and have fun. And all of a sudden, there's this guy in a collar there sitting in on all their conversations. Super awkward.
Yes.
Oh, and then you just have to live with each other.
And then cameras are rolling 24/7.
Yeah, so tell us about that. I've always been curious. You're in a house, sleeping in a house with everybody with cameras all the time around you.
Yes. that was one of the eye-opening parts of this for me, is because you always wonder what goes on behind the scenes of a reality television show, and everything's real. So cameras are rolling, all the conversations, all the drama is just us. And so at first, kind of my demeanor as a pastor is I love being nice to people, and I hope that is true of most pastors. And so I figured I was going to go in there and just be myself and be the nice guy. But everyone at the beginning is trying to be super nice to each other, so much so that it actually was a little grating because it felt really inauthentic. I'm thinking to myself, not every joke that someone tells another person is the funniest joke ever. Right. But people just were trying to be liked in that moment. And so it got over the top in terms of trying to connect with people and be nice. But you're just in this space with each other for 24/7. Cameras are rolling. The only time they're not is if you're in the shower. But even if you're at the bathroom sink, you've got to be wary of being recorded.
That's crazy. How long a duration are we talking about, the period of time that this was happening?
Yeah, so everything's taking place over the course of a few weeks.
When I watched the show, Jacob, I'm realizing there's like a fear factor element. Like, Michelle, there's like bugs involved. There, like you have challenges or missions. What are they called, Jacob?
Each episode there's a challenge to see who becomes the snake for that episode.
But they have to do awful hard things.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's actually a really cool concept. And so the premise of the show was not what I was expecting, but it is a spin on some of the other reality television shows where there's ceremonies where people are voting or saving somebody. And so the concept of this is each week someone becomes the snake, and the snake saves one person, and then that person gets to save one other person, and then that person saves one other person. In this saving safety chain is what it's called, this philosophical term for it. And until there's 2 people left, and then the snake gets to decide which of those 2 people stays and which goes home. And everything's out in the open at that point. So you don't get to have a hidden vote. You don't get to try to do majority wins. You just need one person to save your name, and everything's out in the open. And so if you're going to do something that goes against what you discussed with someone else, you have to do it out in the open with everybody. And so that's a really cool concept. And then it changes. So you could be at the bottom one week and then become the snake the next week. And so each week it resets.
So the snake is the good thing to be.
The snake is the good thing to be. Yeah.
It's like you won the challenge, so you get the
power of making the first choice and the last choice.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of it's about relationship development, because you want to be saved and then save others.
And so typically we ask people kind of what one of the hardest moments of their lives or their careers is that leads to significant growth. We talk about them as shitty experiences or compost-like, manure-like experiences, right, that fertilize really amazing opportunities. I'm so curious about, within the context of the reality show, what one of those really difficult moments was for you. But then more generally in your just life experience, would love to hear you describe one of those real kind of compost moments for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the context of the show, I would say kind of the shitty part of the experience is trying to balance these 2 competing emotions of, I want to be there to be competitive and to respect the game and to do my best to win. But at the same time, I learned that this is a competition that the crux of it is about deceit and manipulation. And I'm there to represent a loving, inclusive version of Christianity. And of all the people there, everyone's referring to each other by their names, not their professions, except for me. For the other contestants, I was always Pastor Jacob. And even when I tried to shed that title and tell people, just call me Jacob, the default was Pastor Jacob. They just couldn't help themselves. They saw me as the pastor there at all times. And so I want, for these people who have had religious trauma, I want to be an example of a trusting form of Christianity, that they can know a pastor in their life that they can trust. And at the same time, I'm expected to deceive and to backstab to get ahead in the game. And so that was really difficult. And so it really messed with my mind. It was a very humbling experience for me to where, I think of myself as someone who could have the ability to get far in this game. But at the same time, I need to do my best to represent the Christian faith. And so that competing values really messed with me and led to some tears and heartache for sure. But I hope as people watch the show, they'll see that I did my best to represent progressive Christianity while playing the game.
Yeah, I think it was so fun watching you, Jacob, with my kids who kept being like, you know him. And so I thought it was so wonderful for kids to just, or anyone, even though they know plenty of clergy in their life because their mom is one of them. And I just want to echo that there is such value in you putting yourself out there. And also, what a vulnerable and humbling task to take on. As I watched you, I thought, oh my gosh, pastors need such thick skin for the work that they do, but this was a whole new level of having people on the show have their own thoughts about who you are, and then people watching. So what's that experience been like for you to kind of be on the receiving end of people's projections, expectations, judgments?
It has been interesting to read comments and thoughts. So if someone watches episode 3, you'll see that in an attempt to be very pastoral and work across enemy lines, work across the aisle, I make a major strategic blunder. And so watching people comment on that, like you said, is just humbling. And so it's just accepting and owning the mistakes I made along the way, and in terms of gameplay and strategy, and also understanding that I've got a bigger mission here. So I'm glad that I'm at least a relevant part of the show so that people are talking about me, and hopefully getting people to know who I am and have conversations and more in depth about what it looks like to be a progressive Christian, or to hold certain values that people don't necessarily see a pastor holding in what they see of Christianity. So it is fun. It's just fun to be in this moment of having dialogue, having conversations with people, and understanding that there's a greater mission at play here.
I'm wondering, because when you're describing the challenge of kind of being two people at once in this game, right? You have to be the competitive, manipulative, strategic person, but you also want to be the person who you are every day, right, as a pastor, and you want to represent that side of things. I imagine that same challenge is for real in life when you're having to live the role of a pastor, right? Like you have to live into this kind of role with a fair amount of authority. People are looking at you, watching you, right? Observing and witnessing what you're up to. At the same time, it's inevitable. I feel like that there's a little bit of like you have to kind of wear your mask in one situation, take it off in life situation. I don't know. Like, I don't know how hard it is to juggle that, but I imagine it's the same outside of a reality show.
Yeah. That's something that people don't necessarily understand, that pastors are human and they have their own human emotions and issues. And so I know that Dana can relate to, I'm sure there are plenty of moments when you're in a church meeting and someone says something that really annoys you and you just want to tell them off or leave the meeting or say, we're not doing this anymore. And you have to not necessarily put on a mask, but understand that I have this belief that I preach, that people are redeemable and people are valued and worth second chances, and that I'm trying to invest in this nonviolent communication style that I think can be revolutionary if we all adopted it. And so you just have to allow yourself to have those emotions and be human and be who you are. while at the same time leading a congregation down a path that you want them to go down as well, to be in this space where people can have conflicting ideas and beliefs and yet somehow be united in a shared mission. That's important, and it's what the world needs. And so it's not necessarily putting your emotions aside, but just realizing that you can have your emotions while at the same time being committed to certain values or methods of communication.
Yeah.
And Jacob, I'm thinking of another parallel of you go off for a few weeks and shoot this reality TV show. I'm imagining you come back and you can't say anything about it for what, a year, like months, a year?
Yeah. A couple months. This one went really fast. So we filmed it in 2025.
Wow. Okay. So you you were out of the country, right? For the filming?
Yeah, we were in Argentina.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you get to see much of it, or?
No, we were filming and then back to the airport.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And then tell me, like, there's still a relationship with the network. So even after you're done recording, there's work that continues for you as a reality, in your new role as reality star.
Yeah, so now it's about being promoters of the show. It's actually a really good show. And so despite the fact that there's a lot of drama and dysfunction, as we would expect from a reality television show, the concept of it, like I said, is really creative and really neat. And so now it's just promoting the show, encouraging people to watch, which has been a major avenue for me to be able to share the message that I want to share with the world. And so there were recently in the last episode, they do a flashback to the first night where, without knowing the OnlyFans creator, someone's at the dinner table making some disparaging remarks about her. And so I spoke up in her defense. And so that was part of this last episode. And there was another podcaster who said, I question in this episode whether this guy was even a real pastor. I don't think that any priest or pastor would say something like that and come to an OnlyFans creator's defense. And so that was an opportunity for me to put out a video of, let's expand our understanding of what a pastor would say. This is what a pastor would say. A pastor would say, God loves everyone without exception. A pastor would say, you should get to know someone before you judge what they do. And so having these conversations live about the show has been a good platform for me to be able to share my wider message.
So you've been able to see the whole thing?
No, we see the episode as it airs.
So as it airs, you don't even get a preview.
No. So we are watching it as it airs. No idea how it's going to be edited. No idea what it's going to look like.
Wow.
Are you still in contact with a lot of the folks?
We are in contact with each other, yes. So everything's mostly amicable, but as things are revealed and people see what they say about each other, I think that there are threads of tension building.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. That's hard. I did want to return, Jacob, to the sort of shittiest moment like outside of the reality show. Just as you think back on your life and your career, what is like the greatest moment of stuckness or challenge that you've faced that actually almost was necessary for you to fertilize that moment moving forward?
I would say it's something that my wife and I are still going through. So we are so incredibly grateful to have a 3-year-old, but we've been going through 10 years of fertility struggle. And so we've had multiple miscarriages and multiple failed rounds of IVF, and we're still attempting to expand our family. And that's something that has been, I wish we did not have to go through it. I wish it had been easy to build our family. I recognize that it makes us capable of having conversations with people who are going through the same experience and to be able to relate with them about it, because that's part of ministering to people is trying to guide them through experiences you haven't gone through. And so going through that makes it easier to help people in a similar situation. Doesn't make it worth it by any means, but it certainly helps. And it's something that we're very open with our congregation about it, only because there are so few models of people talking openly about pregnancy loss and fertility struggles, despite it being so common. And so we've been very open with our congregation about it. And also the fact that it tests our faith. How do you worship a God who you understand to be good when you want something so much and don't get it? And so I think that's part of helping our congregation to relate to their own moments of doubt and struggle, to say, we go through it too. We can't stand up here as pastors and preach to you every week without admitting that doubt is part of our faith. Struggle is part of our faith. We don't worship a magical God who gives us everything that we wish for. That's not part of the spiritual journey. And so that shitty moment is still something that we're going through now. We're going to try another IVF cycle next month in hopes of something happening that hasn't happened before. But that's part of our struggle.
Thank you for sharing so honestly and vulnerably. Yeah.
Of course.
Jacob doesn't take the easy route, does he, Dana?
No, he sure doesn't. What strikes me most about Jacob's story is how he reframed what could have been seen as a failure, people not trusting him on the show, into this profound insight. When he said he's actually glad contestants didn't trust him up front because people shouldn't blindly accept what pastors tell them, that's such a mature perspective on leadership.
Real trust isn't given blindly. It's earned through consistency and showing up as your whole self, even when that's uncomfortable. Jacob's willingness to defend someone when others were disparaging, to share his family's fertility struggles, to admit that doubt is part of faith, that's how trust is actually built.
And it reminds us that sometimes the people who challenge us the most end up teaching us the most about ourselves. Jacob learned that earning trust is actually more valuable than receiving it automatically.
That's what makes his story so compelling. He's showing us that authenticity isn't just about being nice or agreeable. It's about being consistently yourself, even in the most unexpected places, whether that's in the pulpit or on a reality TV show.
She's Michelle Weiss.
And she's Dana Allen Walsh.
This has been another episode of A Life Worth Working.
Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends and loved ones who may also be searching for purpose and meaning in their work lives, or what we call the soul of work.